call to order the City Council meeting of the City of Bel Air Beach, Florida, Monday, August 6, 2018, at 5:30. We all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Andy, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Mark Dean.
Here.
Councilmember Glenn Gunn.
Here.
Councilmember John Petrowski.
Here.
Councilmember Wanda Schwer is not available, he's not here yet. Councilmember Jody Shirley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Nicholas Gregoris.
Here.
Mayor Leslie Ford Notera.
Here.
City Manager Lynn Reeves.
Here.
Finance Officer Melanie Cruzona. Here. Attorney Jackie Spolo Burcham.
Here.
Thank you. First item is the approval of the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Yes, sir?
That the item number 21, put that off to a future date.
Okay. So we have a motion to...
Your microphone, please.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 21 to a later date. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I also have some changes. Regarding the consent agenda, I have some questions about number 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9. So I don't know if you want to pull those out or just question them in sequence when we get to the consent agenda.
Yeah. We can question for 4, 5, which one? 6, 8?
4, 5, 6, 8, and 9.
So you have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. A second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's approved as amended. Item number 2, presentation by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. Gentlemen?
Good evening, I'm Sergeant McMillan with the Sheriff's Office. I have a 4-page report for this task for the month of June 2018. The first page is for Part 1 crimes. There were no Part 1 crimes in the month of June. On the second page is a report for arrest within the city. There were 4 people arrested for a total of 9 charges. The third page is activity within the city. There's 801 events recorded by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office with a total of 884 units that responded for those calls. The final page is crashes and citations within the city. There were no crashes recorded for the month of June. In total, there were 182 citations and/or warnings issued within the city for the month of June.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council?
I do have a question. The decoy units that you've placed around the city, have you noticed any decrease in speeding or reduction in number of citations offered in those areas?
Yes, forgive me for this. I've only been assigned to the contract beaches for about a month or so. In talking with Deputy Vaughn, he's told me that there is currently no speeding issue that he has observed on Gulf Boulevard. As far as I can tell, initially looking into this, what is being done out here is working.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
No, they removed that car. Did they move it down further, or?
I'm sorry, the current location for it, I do not know at this time.
Yeah, it's been moved down by Harrison. The one that's,
They're currently at Harrison first.
Mayor, I have a question. Thank you for your service. You're doing a great job. Just what little observation I had, just following traffic down Gulf Boulevard, it seemed like the decoy vehicles kind of did the job there. And I think we're going to be a little more flexible, move around, and keep that going on. I did have a question about the direction coming down from guidance from the council with respect to traffic. I mean, it's very important, and it was one of our primary concerns, but not at the exclusion of residential patrols or any other area of the city. Has there been any confusion over that or any misinterpretation of that? I just want to drive that point home and make that clear that while we believe that traffic on Gulf Boulevard is a primary concern and issue, it's not to the exclusion of any of the residential areas or focus on crime prevention and deterrence in the residential areas.
Correct. We do maintain our constant watch of Gulf Boulevard. I believe one of our most recent additions for directed patrols would be Harbor Drive and 2nd Street, and I know that you've all has been watching that while we've been working.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your service.
Anything else from council? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Appreciate it. Item 3, citizens' comments. Each speaker will be recognized once and will be limited to a 3-minute presentation on any subject that is not on the agenda. Do we have anyone that would like to speak? Yes, sir. If you state your name and address.
Hello, everybody. Council, my name is Fred Elliott. I live at 2202 Donato Drive. I would like to hand out a presentation. It will take less than 3 minutes. I can hand everybody out just a copy of it.
Thank you. Give one to the clerk for public records.
There was a large group of us that live on Donato Drive, 22nd Street, Althea, Louisa. And we feel that an ordinance in the city is a little bit too drastic and a little bit too hard and creates an unnecessary hardship on us. There used to be an ordinance called K1. It's still in the books right now. Hopefully the ad hoc committee will take care of K1. K1 put a second layer of hardship on these homes. If you look at the first picture I showed you there, that is what is currently permitted and varianced by the city to these homes. And people like myself come in here, we buy these homes, we see what's there, the 3 sailboats, 2 davits and a jet ski, and we figure it's no problem, we can put a boat lift in. Even if we keep the railings low, we don't include anybody's view, but apparently it's a big problem. So, for one, if you look at page 2 of that little handout, you'll see what we propose for our corner of that island. And what that would do to the city, it would help everybody's property values. It would help the outside homeowners' property values by removing tide poles and wet slips that block them currently. It would also help the property values of the entire island and help everybody in Bel Air Beach's property values go up. We just spent 3-4 years on undergrounding our island to increase property values, but we still have ordinances that hurt the property values of the island within the city. If you look at page 3, you will see Madeira Beach's ordinance for the same type of property. And in Madeira Beach, not only did they allow everybody in the city to use the middle third, like all of Dallas County, they also allowed 2 neighbors on this kind of island to put their properties together. And what that does, it allows people access to the ocean. It's called riparian rights. And it also allows people the ability to change their stuff. It doesn't allow people to come in here, buy a home, see a 40-foot sailboat parked in the back of that home, and not be able to put a 20-foot center console back there because they're not able to get a lift. Also, we talk about safety. If you look at that photo, we have 3 boats. They're not currently there now, but they're permitted and have variances for that, okay? Those 3 boats create much more safety concerns than 3 boats on a boat lift that are closer to the seawall. Those tide poles are 50 feet out into the ocean, which are legally allowed to be. So by having boat lifts closer to the seawall, you actually improve resident safety. You do not hinder resident safety. With safety comes liability. You actually increase You have the city had given variances and allowed that, so you actually benefit the liability of the city by lowering the liability for the homeowners that are there. It also helps with the property values, which helps with the tax base of the city. And I don't understand why the city has such a hard time changing ordinances and updating ordinances to help people within the city. And it's buyer beware. How would you guys like it? How would your family like it to come buy a house, have a 40-foot sailboat, or in Mr. Ward's case, a 50-foot egg harbor, and then he cannot have a boat for a 20-foot boat?
Sir, I believe this is being addressed by the Code Review Committee. How are we doing time?
I believe the ad hoc committee had stated to me that they have already brushed this over and looked at it. I believe that this...
You're beyond your 3 minutes.
Am I beyond my 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, can we continue this or have another meeting or have another agenda, another ad hoc?
This has been addressed by the ad hoc committee, and I do believe that the concerns that you have expressed your most interest in have been corrected, and that will come before the council for review and approval once the city attorney has drafted up the changes to the ordinance.
There's 2 layers of restriction and hardship on this
No,
project.
one
She asked me a
one-
question, Mayor. Shouldn't I be able to reply to the question? There's 2 layers. One layer is K1, which limited the size of the docks. The second layer is the setbacks. There were 2 layers made to decrease the property values of these homes, and they were placed on there by somebody within the city or the city council. So they're 2 separate issues. And I believe that this issue is too grand to have an ad hoc committee spend moments on it. You need to have people who know voting. I'm not a pilot, but I'm not making decisions on how airplanes should fly or how they should take off.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Thank you very much for my 3 minutes.
Yeah, let me just comment on this. This is such a hot button issue. And looking at these plans, I think there's probably merit for safety. I think after the committee is finished with all their plans and reviews, I think maybe we could consider referring this to the zoning committee or do a special workshop. Because this is, I mean, you pointed it out. I mean, I could see it clearly. I mean, right here there's 6 inches, and right here there's 12 feet of variance. So yes, I think it should be taken up after. The committee has to do their job, and they're doing a great job. So after the committee is finished, I think we should move it forward to a special workshop or the zoning committee.
Can I say thank you, or is my 3 minutes up?
You're very welcome.
Anyway, yes, ma'am. Your name and address?
I'm Barb Colucci, 104 9th Street. And let me start this by saying that we couldn't have picked a better place to live, to move, to retire. This is where we dreamed of living. So I'll start with that. We did downsize from a huge house up north in the Chicago area and came down here. And unfortunately, we're not duped, but had a situation. There's pictures there. If you just want to pass them down, we didn't make a lot of them. We thought that our permit for a shed that we built so we could park our car in our garage, we have a 1-car garage and we have a 1,000 square foot home. We thought that the permit was all done through who we had our builder do it. And unfortunately it wasn't. And now we've been cited. So we're here actually to ask for a variance. And if you look at the pictures, you can see that it absolutely enhances our property, our backyard. You can't see it from the street. And we actually tremendously need it to be able to live in our home and stay here, which of course we want to do. So we're requesting some type of variance to allow us to keep our shed if you don't mind.
Okay, by city code, that request would go to the Board of Adjustment or to the Special Magistrate Board of Adjustment. The City Council does not do variances.
How about changes to ordinances? Is that
We are in the process of reviewing our ordinances,
Okay.
our code ordinances for things like this. So, as Councilmember Schwer said, they're going to be coming out in not too distant future with the report and the recommendations.
Okay. We also have signatures from all of our neighbors that are directly affected by, to let you know that it doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form. They actually love it and love coming to visit our house. So.
What's the procedure? You were saying that there's another avenue we should...
There's a Board of Adjustment or a special magistrate for the Board of Adjustment. And there are procedures in the code as to what you go through to file for an adjustment. So, pardon?
We just handle that through the village?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you go online to the website, you can get the code of ordinances and find the rules in there too. Okay.
Unfortunately, too late.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Sir?
Yes.
My name is Gene Burgess. I live at 111 5th Street, and I want to thank the council for letting me speak this evening. I want to preface this by saying I do love this area. I retired down here, and I plan to stay here until they carry me out. I live in a modest home. I take very good care of my property, and I have a single-car garage. My problem is storage also. I'm all right with the other codes that go along with outdoor shed, which would be my only alternative, except for the maximum size of 36 square feet. I look at a storage shed as something I can go into and take what I want out, whether it's a lawnmower or bicycle or whatever, and be able to put it back in where it belongs without moving a lot of totes and boxes and rearranging in this 36 square foot area. So I'm just asking that with the new members of the board and the code enforcement folks, if we could go back and revisit and possibly revise the maximum square footage of the shed.
Thank you, sir.
If I can just add, I think we sent pictures.
You, Mrs. Burgess?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm Becky Burgess at 111 5th Street. Thank you. And hopefully you got those. The building is absolutely beautiful, and it does enhance our yard as well as our ability to use the garage. So if we can really be able to look at the square footage, that's the only thing that was not in compliance.
Same with ours.
Okay. Any other citizen comments? I see two hands. The one on the right side, that side was there first. She, well, whatever.
Mike Dershowitz, 102 8th Street. My concern is also city codes. I understand the ad hoc committee is in the review process and is editing the codes. My concern is that as citizens, we will get their opinion of what we want and need. My concern is there a way to have more citizen input into this process instead of having basically our fates determined by this committee and this group? Because the code is currently very convoluted, is contradictory, and is basically impossible to comply with, particularly on sheds. There are direct conflicts that make it impossible. Consequently, I would like to see more citizen involvement. Bel Air Beach is small enough, it seems like the committee could sponsor a questionnaire of some sort, maybe multiple rewrites of the code, send it out and ask people what they want to see in their community.
With all due respect, sir, the committee is more than half citizens as opposed to council people. It's at least half and half. And the meetings have all been noticed. There's a notice on the sign out there for next 2 meetings. There's one tomorrow night. So there is an opportunity for citizen input.
okay?
It's not like it's the council that's doing it. We're going to.
I understand, but for instance, one point would be that I think everyone on the council, with the exception of Mr. Reeves, lives north of the causeway and all have waterfront property with the exception of you who lives in a condo, so that the issue of sheds does not affect anyone on the board the way it affects me and the people that are south of the causeway that have a 60 by 110 foot lot and just don't have physically room. Our lot sizes are very prohibitive for location of a shed.
Thank you, sir. There was one more, yes.
Mayor, Councilman, my name is Lois Ann Chapman. I live at 3111 Woodward Drive, Myrtle Beach. I've been here 30 years. On July 26, 2018, I called the code enforcement to ask them if I needed a permit to put a tarp down to have shelves delivered in front of my driveway. The shelves would be removed the same day as I had put them down. She said that she had to check with Lynn Reeves before she said that she could answer me. Lynn Reeves had said no at the time. At the time, I told her that a trailer full of sand was on the road at Belle Isle, and it had been there since July 23rd, morning and night. It was on 421 Belle Isle. It was sitting there all the time. On July 30th, a truckload of brown dirt was put in front of the trailer, and on the road, the next morning on Tuesday, there was dirt all the way over to the middle of the road. I called and left a message on that day, so other people called also. Finally, on August 1st, 2018, the trailer was removed at some time in the day. Also, at 3120 Tiffany, a boat and trailer has been sitting in the driveway for over 2 weeks. Neighbors also had a construction crew on Sunday doing their dock over near me. If we are going to have codes, they need to be all enforced. Thank you.
Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Hope Adams, 110 16th Street. I have the same problem. My house has been 30 years old, and the shed has been, she said, as you can see from the street. My house has been laying down differently. I have the driveway on the side, and therefore you can see everything in the back. I don't have any backyard. In fact, I asked for the inspector, she came, and she saw it, and she said, yes, I don't have any. I have a big house, but the backyard very tiny, teeny, can't even turn around, has very swimming pool, covering all the area. I can't move it to any place. And this is, of course, you know, it takes a lot of things inside. Please just put in consideration that all the houses with the area we have, a small tiny lot, and we bought the house this way, we did not do anything in it, and we put the shed 2-3 years after we got the house with the swimming pool. And thank you.
Or don't you keep the address in it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Dr. William P. Ward, 2199 Louisiana Drive. I want to congratulate this council in their conduct and their approach to these people that are complaining. This is the first time I've seen this many people at a council meeting since I've been here 30 years. And I like that. I like their input. They may have a little problem with this, that, and the other, but you're listening to them. You're taking up the codes. You're doing that. If they would come to some of the code meetings, they could express themselves that way better. And I just think you because of the council listening now, I think you would get people from the south side of Gulf Boulevard as well as the north side. Congratulations.
Thank you. I think we should end on that note. Any other citizen comments? Okay, we will end. The consent agenda, there were a couple of items that we wanted to talk about, but the ones that are not at issue are 7, 10, 11, and 12. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 7, 10, 11, and 12 are approved. Item number 4, approval of the July 2nd council meetings and the July 16th budget workshop minutes. Len?
Yes, I had a question on number 13, mayor and council comments. Number 13, second paragraph. City Attorney Marino explained that the seal logo was also copyrighted to its use on the city website. I briefly discussed the letter that went from the city to the resident after as the letter expressed an unauthorized use of the city logo. The sequence of the events was such that the logo was used prior to being codified by the council for protection, that sort of thing. I do still have some follow-on questions about the legitimacy of the copyright of this thing, and I'll ask you.
If I may say something, we're looking at approving the minutes. Is that what happened at the meeting? What is in the minutes?
Well,
I mean, you may have issues with it later, but is that what happened at the meeting?
Shall we take it offline and?
No, I'm saying that, you know, whether you like what happened at the meeting or not is not the question. It's what happened at the meeting. Did you ask about it?
I question its legitimacy.
Pardon?
I question the legitimacy of that statement.
Did he not explain the seal logo was also copyrighted through its use on the city website? Did he say that?
He did.
Okay, then that's in the meeting, in the minutes, and that's correct. Whether it's legitimate or not is a whole different matter.
Then I take this offline with the city attorney then?
Yeah. Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the July 2nd city council meetings and the July 16th budget workshop minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, number 4 is approved. Number 5, authorization to execute interlocal service agreement for traffic control signals. And I know Lynn has one thing on 5.
Yeah, I gave that to everyone, Appendix B, which I provided to you.
Appendix B was inadvertently left off. Any other discussion on the interlocal service agreement for the traffic control signs?
I have one question. Section 5, number 5.5. It talks about in the event the city places or has placed a red light running camera on traffic control device maintained by the county. Is there any intention of that we know of? Is that a county requirement?
No.
This agreement really came from the county directly. It's a renewal of something that we had previously, and for the most part, it is a duplicate other than some date changes. This is for the crosswalks only. And I don't think we put a red light camera on a crosswalk.
Well, I'm just questioning it. It's in the verbiage there, and I've been in other municipalities where they had it and all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I don't, unless the council at some point in time wants to put a red light camera up, this really has no effect on this agreement.
At this point, we do not have one. So
No.
the as placed is.
And there's no intention that we know of.
Right.
Okay.
Up to the council.
Ask and answer.
Anything else on item number 5?
Lynn, question for you. Response time. There's really not too much mentioned in there as far as response time.
Response for maintenance, you mean?
Right.
No, this is basically the fee that we pay to maintain them. We just call them, and generally speaking, they're pretty good about coming out fixing them.
All right, I remember past years, way back, it was quite an issue to try to get the flashing yellows repaired.
Yeah, we've got one that we called in on 6th Street, because it's one out, so.
Any other discussion on this agreement? I have a motion to approve the to execute the interlocal agreement for the traffic control signs.
Motion approved.
Second.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's approved. Number 6, authorization to execute interlocal service agreement for planning and mapping services and/or special project work.
I just had one background question on that. I saw a similar interlocal agreement with Governor Delos. Does this allow us to use the Ford Canals to help us assist us in writing grant applications?
Well, the current person that does that now, we spoke to her and she wasn't interested in doing any other cities. We're talking Linda Fisher.
Yeah.
Yeah, she, at the time, you know, I could go back to her, the grant that she was talking about, I wouldn't recommend we paid someone for that because it's mainly a point-based thing and you can fill it out as an application. So, but at this point, yes, what this is, it's a renewal of an agreement that we currently have with the Forward Canals to do any planning things that we want within the city. So it's just an extension of an existing contract. But we could use them for something if they wanted to do that. But the last time I talked to Linda Fisher, she wasn't interested in it.
And when was that? Was it recently or?
It was last fall.
Okay, so, yeah, because I had spoken to her a year ago, and she wasn't even doing it anymore, but she hadn't been backfilled, but now it sounds like she's back in that job. So
We can find out if she is.
maybe we need to follow up. Okay, thank you.
Is she still with Ford Canals?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that's time to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I will tell you though, the grant she was writing, we've done a couple of them here and they were successful. But the problem, the grant she's writing is for art.
Just by reputation, I mean, she's so grant worthy that I think it's good to develop a relationship.
Oh, no, that's not an issue.
I do have one other question. When you're mapping, what are they mapping for us?
If we ask them for like GIS or something, that's what they would do.
So all the underground work that we're doing for drainage, are we having that mapped? Are we getting the maps updated so at a future date when Lynn Reeves is gone, we know where those new pipes run and what the services are for?
Well, anything that's put in, we would have an as-built survey for it.
But it doesn't hit the.
It doesn't hit GIS, no.
Can we do that? Can we have them do that? Because it's,
I guess we could. It's quite expensive to do the GIS, but that could be done, I guess, in the long term.
I mean, it's something we should just maybe look at.
Yeah.
I mean, just because in the, 50 years from now,
Right.
when we're having to rebuild those pipes again, it's not good.
Understand.
We'll have the information available.
Yeah, I can ask them for a quote. Well, their quote's kind of there, but I can ask them what it would cost the GIS the city.
As we do the work, that it gets documented somewhere.
Yeah.
Other than in a file.
All right. Any other questions?
Then I have a question. This is in regards to the path between the park and First Street. Is there any way that they can map that for us?
You're talking about the walking easement.
Walking path, correct?
Well, really, that would be, you'd want a survey of it because you need to outline the actual property. And so that really wouldn't be, then we would just have our survey company to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to, so the council understands, we don't have the capability here to, we don't have ArcView or AutoCAD or any of that here. That's something that if we had all this GIS stuff, the city would never be able to really look at it unless it was placed somewhere else.
GIS maps you can pull up from any computer.
I understand that, but you need that mapped, and it would have to be, how do I say, placed somewhere that had that GIS program to go to. Yes, you can look at county maps, but
Well, here's the thing. You hire an engineer on every project
Yeah.
that you start working. that engineer can access those GIS
Right.
maps and tell you where all the underground utilities are. Right now, we're kind of poking around and trying to figure that out, like at the intersection of Belle Isle. And, I mean, I know you know where it is now, but in the beginning, how did you get all that information? So I'm just saying, to not have a problem down the road, and the same if we do, you know, if this underground utility takes place, all of that should be mapped so that there's no question where those lines lie.
No, I'm not debating that, I'm just saying that we don't have the software for you to be able to pick it up here, is what I'm saying.
Just future.
Yeah.
It's not something we gotta discuss right now.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to execute the interlocal service agreement?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Number 8, authorization to award the bid 18-04 drainage improvements for Belle Isle Avenue. Yeah.
I had a question, if you just refresh my memory, is there likely to be grant money to go after for that one?
No, this is the grant program I'm trying to get money for is in an out year, which I have a meeting on Thursday, it's with me. Yeah, so not, typically you can't get it from behind.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
We have a motion to authorize awarding the bid 1804.
Motion approved.
Motion made, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Number 9, authorization to enter into an agreement with Duke Energy for undergrounding of the utility crosswires along Gulf Boulevard from First Street to Causeway Boulevard. This is a project for the Gulf Boulevard.
Yeah, this is the
beautification
Gulf
pending.
Boulevard beautification project. We have funding for it. We're in the process right now of getting the easements from the landowners in Bel Air Shore, because that's where we've started the project on the west side, eliminating the cross wires from First through Causeway and the wires on the west side of the road with this project money. Currently, the plan is to, after October 1st, is to finish Gulf Boulevard going north.
The only question I had was half of Duke Energy's letter there is under their proposal assumptions. Half of that page is all the things that is not included in the cost. So is that 397th, is that everything, or are there going to be other costs with telephone, cable, television, restoration, service?
Yeah, the only other thing we should have is from Spectrum. And actually, I just got that number late Friday, so I didn't put it, it was too late for the agenda. It's $18,000 for the first section, and he estimated that the other end would cost us about 25. So, we've got the money funded for this. And myself and Duke have met with 2 or 3 of the different property owners, and we've talked to 3 others about the location of where they would put their equipment in their front yard. And basically, it's behind the wall of most of those homes on Gulf Boulevard for the transformers. And at the council's pleasure in the future, with the next Gulf Boulevard money, we should have the opportunity, if we want to go to the east side of the road and take everything there. So,
Any other questions on this?
and this is reimbursable, just so everybody knows that. It's not costing us anything.
Okay, do I have a
Quick
motion to?
question. Okay, so when we're doing that, are we talking also about the lighting, changing the lighting to the solar lights at the same time or not?
The lighting on that side of the road belongs to Bel Air Shore, so it has nothing to do with us, the street lights.
Okay, do I have a motion to authorize entering into the agreement with Duke Energy?
Motion approved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, regular agenda for item 13, the Code Review Advisory Committee report. Wanda, it's all yours.
Haven't we discussed it already? Anyway, the committee has met, I think, 3 times now. Our very first meeting was basically an organizational meeting. Paul gave everyone an overview of the Sunshine Law, and we talked a little bit about Robert's Rules of Order, and I assigned the committee to review Chapter 10 of the City Code, and that was the chapter that we discussed the following week. And I believe you all have gotten minutes from each of the meetings so far, so I'm not going to go through those in detail. What we were asked to do was to review all of the codes and look for basically areas that we could tighten up for enforcement, or to look for any inconsistencies. And that's basically what we've been focusing on, is where we could tighten up enforcement, or where enforcement needed to be corrected, or where there were inconsistencies or corrections that needed to be made. And when we have had requests from citizens to look at specific areas, we have done that as well. For example, in the docks and seawalls, we did look at the section that Mr. Elliott mentioned, and that was Chapter 30, where there was a section referred to as K1. We did modify that to relieve at least one of the layers. But yes, the decision was reached by the committee and agreed to by the residents that were there, that any variances would still go before the Code Enforcement Committee or Code Enforcement Board, or to the Special Magistrate. So we are following the instructions that we were given, and we do have a city attorney at each of those meetings, as well as citizens have been invited to attend. The next meeting will be tomorrow night, and it looks like we are probably on schedule to complete our review of each chapter in the timeline that was initially given us. And I expect we will have a full report for the council by the October 1st board meeting or council meeting. And I do know that Jackie has said she's reviewing several areas that we had raised as needed further research, and to see where there may be better practices in some other cities, and adopting some of that language where there were better practices. And we expect to start presenting before council a few ordinance changes, probably within the next month or so.
We're meeting tomorrow night at 4 o'clock?
Meeting tomorrow night at 4
What
o'clock.
session's up tomorrow night?
Parks and Recreation.
Council, any questions, comments?
You're all invited to attend if you wish to.
Yes.
Okay. Since my name was mentioned, can I quickly just...
Yes.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. Fred Elliott, 2202 Donato Drive, Bel Air Beach, Florida. I want to thank everybody here for their hard work, and I especially want to thank the ad hoc committee for all their hard work. As I stated earlier, there are 2 levels of undue necessary hardships on these 17 properties in our island. And one of them was so kindly looked at, and they agreed that it was a hardship that should be taken out. The other one, unfortunately, I don't believe has given enough time to really sit down and speak of. I know that they spoke about after the ad hoc committee, but I think that it should go to zoning and planning or have a side committee. That one there, as Mrs. Scher just said, that they're trying to look at other communities and come up with ordinances that match other communities that do not create hardships. That page 3, Madeira Beach, just like every other city in Pinellas County, does not create hardships on these homes, helps with property values, and does not put a buyer beware on the residents of Bel Air Beach. I appreciate all your work, but the work still needs to continue. Thank you very much.
Lynn, would it be possible to put this issue in front of the zoning commission? I should say.
Well, at this point, I think we need to get through the code review before we move on. Okay, it's a code issue as opposed to planning and zoning issue that he's talking about.
Now, if there's still an issue after the code has wrapped up their committee, then what?
If I may speak, I do know that the individual homeowners that are affected here have retained a marine engineer to look at that and to draw up plans and bring those plans before the Board of Adjustment. And that's what was done for the docks on Harrison Street, and those were granted. And I have told Mr. Gilly, I certainly hope once they get through with their marine engineering planning and presentation to either the Board of Adjustments or to the special magistrate, I hope they receive favorably. That's the process to take. That's the process that has worked in the past, even under the current restrictions.
Thank you very much for that. The Board of Adjustments is a legal entity. You guys are legislative. If there is an issue, and I'd like to have the attorney speak on this, if there is an issue with an ordinance that multiple houses have to go in front of the Board of Adjustment, then it's not the Board of Adjustment's place, it's the legislative place to fix the ordinance that creates the hardship. You guys created the hardship, not you in general, but the city did. And the city needs to take the time to look at it and not just send me and any other people to the Board of Adjustment. And it's not fair for one person to get something and then someone with a larger lot to be refused, whether it's a shed, a pool, a bird cage, whatever it is.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Wanda, I'm done. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you and all your committee members for all you've been doing.
Mayor, can I address that? I've attended every one of these meetings. The council brought the code enforcement thing before the council because a lot of things weren't being enforced. There was a patchwork, some of the ordinances were out of date. And so they spooled up this ad hoc committee to take a look at this thing. And that was directly as a result because the residents themselves were saying, we want to focus on code enforcement. So that's what's going on here. I'm very familiar with this issue affecting these lots that were primarily less than 44 feet on the sea level. That restriction was removed. The committee was initially spooled up with only 3 residents from the community, and it was because there was so much interest, it was expanded to 7. So there was a lot of interest out there, and the council took that into consideration when they came up with it. And people have been attending these things, and they've been given a voice and listened to, and the committee considered all of the inputs and have made some decisions. They're familiar with the geometry thing affecting these pie-shaped lots. The removal of K1 did a lot because what it basically did was it brought into line the same considerations for every waterfront lot. They're all the same 12-foot setback. You don't have to have your docks centered. You have the exact same width and length restrictions as every other lot now. The committee did consider changing the setbacks for these lots, and in their consensus, they decided not to. Because the thought was that if you have a cogent and legitimate argument, you take it before the Board of Adjustment, and it would be heard there and fairly decided on what to do with it. The biggest thing I can say for any of these issues, and there are issues affecting the entire city. In the south, it's sheds. In the front, in the northern end, it's the waterfront. You've got to attend these code enforcement committee meetings and have your voice heard. They're listening. It's made up of residents, and everybody kind of understands all of the inputs and concerns of the Bel Air Beach area. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're done with the code review committee. Okay. Item number 14, consideration of resolution 2018-15.
Okay, for resolution 2018-15, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Bel Air Beach, Florida, honoring 50 years of municipal home rule in the Florida Constitution and committing to help Floridians understand this beneficial right and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for resolution 2018-15?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
This says 50 years ago, municipal home rule was established, and lately it's become even more important here because of the short-term rental issues, the differences we're having with the folks in Tallahassee, which is going to be a big issue at the Florida League of Cities. But this is just celebrating the 50 years of home rule and saying Bel Air Beach seriously believes in it.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. Any questions, comments, discussions? No? Patty, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Bean.
Aye.
Councilmember Gunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Petrowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwer.
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fedorowicz.
Aye.
Mayor Notaro.
Aye. Passes 7-0. Number 15, consideration of ordinance 1805.
Ordinance 18-05, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Bel Air Beach, Florida, granting to the City of Clearwater, Florida, a franchise for the purpose of furnishing natural gas services within the corporate limits of the City of Bel Air Beach, providing for purpose, providing for definitions, providing for terms and grant, providing for rates, providing for extension of service, providing for force majeure, providing for a non-compete, providing for termination, providing for a franchise fee, providing for favored nation provision, providing for service standards, providing for cost, ownership, repair, relocation, providing for indemnification, providing for insurance, providing for compliance of ordinances, providing for availability of records, providing for assignment of grant, providing for conflict, providing for alternative remedies, providing for acceptance, providing for resolution by grantee, providing for governing law, providing for notices, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
That's it. Do I have a motion for ordinance 1805?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Christie's here.
From Clearwater Gas.
Hi, I go to a lot of these. My name is Christy Cheatham Pettit. I'm with Clearwater Gas. I go to a lot of these commission meetings, and I would have to say for one of the smaller beach area communities to see these people here. I remember when Mike Kelly was mayor when I did this years ago, and to see everybody here actively so involved, very impressed. And I live in St. Pete Beach where it can get a little crazy sometimes. Anyway, I'm here to answer any questions. I brought a map with all of our gas mains located in the city, with all of the service lines to each of the 234 residences who have natural gas. Mr. Reeves asked me to provide that electronically, so hopefully I will have that to you this week. Y'all can post it on your website. And if you have any other questions for me, we enjoy our community partnership with the city of Bel Air Beach.
Any questions for Chrissy or for Lynn? Thank you.
All right,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question for you. I can't get over that easy.
Okay.
The question I have is, when gas was put in on my particular street, one owner wanted it. So he had to put the whole bill for the main down the street. Now, I know the whole city isn't providing gas mains down the street. So how can you help an owner if they want gas provided in their home and they're the only one on the street?
Great question. Two things that we do. We provide, what we provide for your city, we also provide for the other 20 cities and unincorporated 2 counties that we serve. We have what we call a Strategic Neighborhood Expansion Program. We call it SNEP. And what it is for every homeowner who wants to put in a gas water heater and any other appliance. Right now, we're getting a lot of people wanting generators. So as long as they put in a water heater and another appliance, that we will run 300 feet. So if you live at the end of your beach street, finger is what I call them, if you live at the end, then we're going to mail all of your neighbors through there and see if their interest is, if it's there. In the last 3 years, and I've been here almost 20, we've only had to, if people, if your friend, if they paid, I'm gonna just throw out a number, $5 grand to get it there, right? Just ballpark. And let's say, but between where we extended it and his house, if anybody jumps on that main extension, we will reimburse the original homeowner who forked out the money up front, but they have to turn the meter on within a year of when that person turned their meter on.
All right, Lynn, I'm going to put another question to you. If that would be a burden on some of our residents, is there any way that we can get a grant to the city, foot that bill somehow for the difference?
I don't know off the top of my head if there's any
Like, we don't have financing, but it's, you know, if you get 300 feet, St. Pete, where people's gas is, they don't do anything. And I say this respectfully, I work there, but they don't focus on the residents the way we do. So our incentive is to create incentives and allowances for the customers as to why they would want to jump on our bandwagon. So the mailers work great, but what really works is when Stan Sofer walks outside and sees his neighbor and he goes, if you get gas, we're going to save 60% on our Duke Energy bill. You're going to have a generator for hurricanes, and by the way, I don't have to pay as much up front. So a lot of that is good talking. You know, your neighbor might be remodeling. You know that. We don't know that. So, but the hurricane season, we lost 0 customers during Hurricane Irma. Which was phenomenal, and of course, my Duke Energy colleagues don't like it when I say that, but it's a big deal for us to say how reliable we are, and I can tell you 3 different personal stories that people said to me as I was working in the Irma Emergency Operations Center. Christy, we had our whole house on a generator. We didn't lose power. We had neighbors come over, and elderly people, and people with their food, so generators are a good thing to have.
Do you offer generators in your program?
We do not provide them. We have the local. We have 2 local generator companies that
that work with
us. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions, council? No. Patty, want to call the roll, please?
Councilmember Bean.
Aye.
Councilmember Gunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Petrowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwer.
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Boris. Mayor Notaro.
Aye. Ordinance 1805 passes 7-0. Number 16, consideration of resolution 2018-14.
That's fine.
That's it.
It's consideration of resolution 2018-14, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Bel Air Beach, Florida, amending the administrative and legal fees for the Board of Adjustment hearings as provided for in Section 9462D and E of the City Code and establishing an effective date. You have a copy of the amendments. What this is to do, it's to increase the variance fee to $500 from the current $3, because we found that it costs more to do that. With the mailings, the postings, the advertisements we have to put in the newspaper. So that's that cost. And if the magistrate is used, there's a deposit of $500. If the magistrate isn't used, there's no additional fee. So that's basically what it's stating.
Do I have a motion for 2018-14?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion, questions? Patty?
Councilmember Bean.
Aye.
Councilmember Gunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Petrowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwer.
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Boris.
Aye.
Mayor Notaro.
Aye. Passes 7-0. Number 17, authorization to reject all proposals.
Yes, this came up at the undergrounding committee last week. So what I'm requesting is the council authorize rejection of all proposals from RFQ 1-2017, professional service for undergrounding utilities in Bellevue Island Estates, in the best interest of the city, and authorize re-advertisement of request for qualifications. The committee had quite a discussion on this. We have signed no contract with CPWG other than the initial time. And I think the committee as a whole felt, and Mr. Goldman's here, he could express his thoughts on it, but if he wants to. But the committee's thoughts in entirety were to go out for another RFP.
Can you elaborate on that?
Pardon?
Can you elaborate on what you're saying a little more?
We're going to go out for another request for qualifications for another engineering firm. Because the estimate that was brought forward by the previous engineering firm was significantly lower than what came in as far as cost to date. So we're finalizing all those costs, and then we want to go out for another RFQ for another engineering firm that we feel, the group feels is more capable of doing what they were looking for to begin with.
Is there another firm that you use?
Oh, there's several firms. I can tell you the last time I spoke to several firms after, because we only got one proposal, and the reason they didn't submit was because the view at the time was there was only one firm that anybody was going to select, and it was CPWG.
Was it CPWG issue or a Duke Energy issue?
Well,
With cost?
well, you're asking a consultant to give you the estimate that seems to be reliable, and in looking at that, the estimate was very low.
I have a quick question. Now, did Duke Energy sign off on that original non-binding agreement by CPWG?
No.
They didn't?
No, there were, and I brought this to the committee a couple times, that the discussion that was had was, yes, they're having meetings with Duke Energy, but when I spoke to Duke about it, I was told there was no meeting held.
So CPWG and Duke Energy never got together and said, hey,
Not
this
in
is...
the most recent one, to my
Oh,
knowledge.
no, to the previous one, the original non-binding agreement. That's the one I'm talking about.
That was like 3 years ago?
3 years ago. 3 years ago, yes. Did they sign off on that?
I'd have to look at the document, but a non-binding agreement from any utilities is a moot point. And I don't know if they got that from, I guess, that's another meeting, but better than I would, he was more involved.
That bid was signed off by, or not the bid, but the proposal was signed off by Duke Energy.
I don't remember if it was signed.
So, I mean, if they
It was
did...
signed off and then given to two people that bid on the project. One was CPWG that asked for it, and that was also given to Doolin Associates, who presented another cost, and that was 2015.
So Duke Energy signed off on the... Let me just see if I get this right, because I didn't quite understand it, during the underground committee meeting. So Duke Energy signed off on the original non-binding agreement, the one we have an issue with right now, because it was too low, correct?
I don't know what Duke's position would be in that situation, because I do know that the estimate that Dual did, that number was $450,000 last year.
Less than what Duke's is right now?
No, 450,000 just for Duke's portion.
What Dual did was just add 15% per year on top of the original bid, but that bid from Duke Energy was given to Dual by Duke. The same one that they did for CPWG.
I mean, the point that I'm trying to get at is if Duke signed off on the 2015 non-binding agreement and now has exponentially increased their costs by close to 40%, I mean, that's price gouging.
Well, no, you're missing what they signed off on. And I don't know what they actually, if the cost that they signed off on was to do what they're proposing now, and not installing the conduit, and that's what I understood all the time CPWG was doing. Then their cost from 2015 was $350,000, I believe it was.
Yes.
And their cost today is $550,000. And that's 3 years later. And their cost by the dual estimate was 406, I don't have it.
450 around.
Yeah. So it's, you know, and I met with the person that's, we looked at the numbers, and that's doing the project, and I don't know if he's gone or not. He might be picking on him, but anyway, we looked at those numbers and they threw a spreadsheet, and they were within reason of what is being charged for the tariff currently.
But that's accounting for the loop system, correct?
Yes, and we're asking them the question currently, if they will accept a radial system. We're asking that question, and I'm also asking them for the quantities, a takeoff, as opposed to, I've got the plan, but I'd lose my eyesight if I went down trying to add up those numbers.
Doing both. Now, with that said, back in 2015, if they did sign off on it, which Marv, you said they did sign off on it?
Well, it's signed by Duke Energy.
Okay, well, that's what I mean. Okay. That did not include the loop system.
We don't know that. We don't, it doesn't say radio or loop. It doesn't say anything about that.
But they signed off on the cost, though.
As a non-binding cost. The city did not pay any money to get a binding cost from the utility due. You have to submit an engineering fee, which we did, and that's what we have now. We actually have a binding cost that's good until January 17th. So the cost difference right now, we're kind of talking two different things, because they said non-binding, whatever this letter. And I don't recollect that the one I have is even signed. I don't know.
It is, I have a copy.
Because my big concern is I don't want them to upgrade their system when our done.
I understand that, but what I've been told from not only Duke, but outside agencies, is that the loop system came in several years ago. It didn't just come in. And realistically, I would think that any engineering firm that is talking to us would tell you that they were using the current standards as opposed to, but those questions have been posed to the partner Miriam, who I deal with a lot, was out of the office last week. I did get an email from her this afternoon, and she's going to gather that information.
I have a question. The fact that you have to go back out now for a new RFP, is that going to affect the timeline that had been drawn up?
Well, depending on what happens in the next resolution, and the discussions that we had at the committee meeting, I think we're okay with, if we're going to move forward, if it's recommended September 5th, the public hearing meeting, to move forward. I think we have that time to get the RFQ out, get them back, get it resolved, and maybe we'll have several firms that apply, knowing that previously the only one that it seemed like the group, I guess, felt that CPWG was the only game in town. And I know that I can tell you that some of the committee members currently have a different idea about that. And some of the council members, and we've had discussions about that. So this isn't just, happened, I guess. But we are going to talk to Duke more about the numbers, and once we get takeoff, members, then we'll be able to go to somebody and say, I want you to bore whatever the linear footage is. I think it's like 8,000 in their proposal or something like that. We can get those boring numbers, and maybe they aren't as bad as we think. Because Duke's boring number was 984, and CPWG's was 425. Big difference.
What are the next
Does the
items?
loop system anywhere along the beach?
I can't tell you that.
I mean, we should know that. If they have their own on the beach, why should we have to do it?
Well, and I do know that in a transmission line situation like Gulf Boulevard, that is not a loop system because it's a dead end. That's a transmission line, different story. Now, what they put in other residential areas, I can't tell you that, but I'll be glad to ask that question.
And that's one of the things that's in the sequence is, one of the next items is to have that meeting with Duke to clarify the regulatory requirements for this loop system, because the question is, it provides a benefit within Bellevue Estates Island, but that same redundancy isn't necessarily outside Bellevue Estates Island that feeds it. So the question is it necessary? Mr. Goldman is the chairman of the committee. Do you have any other insights in that, Mark?
Well, you've pretty much covered all the areas. I think it's very evident to both the city council and the members of the community here tonight that we placed our faith in a company that did not go the extra mile to do their homework and only furnished us a number that appeared to be correct without validating all of the methodologies and perhaps the methodologies that have changed. So unfortunately, it comes back to us to work our way out of this. There's really nothing else for us more to do but what Lynn is discussing in having our discussions with Duke and seeing just how much we can shave off the overage so that we can come in with our number.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to authorize rejecting the proposals and re-advertising for professional services?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? We don't need it. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Consideration of resolution 2018-16.
Okay. And I have Chris Rowe here to explain and answer any questions. Resolution 2018-16, a resolution of the City of Delaware Beach, Florida, relating to Bellevue Estates Island utility undergrounding and street lighting improvement project, ratifying and confirming City Resolution numbers 2018-02 and 2018-03, which created the Bellevue Estates Island assessment area and imposed special assessments therein to fund the improvement project, providing for the imposition of supplemental special assessments to fund the additional costs associated with the project, estimating the additional project costs and the amount of the supplemental assessment to be imposed against affected tax parcels, establishing a method of assessing the additional project costs against specially benefited real property, directing the city manager to prepare a supplemental assessment roll, establishing a public hearing to consider the imposition of the supplemental assessments, directing the provision of notice in connection therewith, and providing for an effective date.
We have a motion for 2018-16.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Shall we turn it over to Chris?
Yes.
Attorney who says,
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, good evening, Council. I'm Chris Rowe with the law firm Bryant Miller Olive, and helped the city establish the Bellevue Estates Island assessment area earlier this year. The assessment area was established in response to petitions of the property owners in the area seeking the undergrounding of the utility improvements and the imposition of special assessments against each parcel in the area to fund the project. The petition process indicated substantial support among affected property owners for creating the area. In fact, Of the 115 property owners, 95 submitted petitions, 85 of which, 90%, were in favor of moving forward with the project. In response to that, the city took the steps that were necessary and required under the city's assessment procedure ordinance to create the assessment area and impose the assessments therein to fund the project. After imposing the assessments at its March 5th public hearing, I went forward with a bond validation proceeding on behalf of the city, whereby I sought judicial approval in the Circuit Court from Dallas County to basically allow the city to go forward with the project, knowing they had the legal authority to impose the special assessments, and also to borrow money with which to pay for the project, with the loan repaid over time through the annual special assessments. That validation hearing was conducted in late May. The appeal period ran with no appeals taken, and at the conclusion of the appeal period, staff, myself, and the city's financial advisor undertook the steps necessary to procure a bank to provide the financing. The financial advisor was able to get favorable proposals from a number of different banks that would allow for the financing of the project over time. One in particular was very, very helpful. It was an interest rate that was actually lower than the interest rate used to calculate the annual assessments. And almost as importantly, the bank was willing to go out a full 20 years for the assessment term. In my experience, it's somewhat unusual for a bank to offer a 20-year financing on a project like this. They prefer to limit it to 10 or 15 years. Of course, if you limit the payment period, you make your annual payments that much higher because you're paying back the debt over a shorter period of time. So very, very good news that we were able to obtain bank financing for the project. As we were working with the financial advisor to bring that in for a landing, so to speak, the city manager undertook the steps necessary that have been discussed at some length during the last agenda to obtain the binding cost estimate from Duke, one of the three utility companies involved in the undergrounding initiative. That estimate indicates the project cost we used to derive the assessments in March was actually low by approximately $640,000. The under amount is tied to the core components. Council may recall, and for those who are new to the council since that time, that the improvements are basically categorized in two ways. One is the core components, which is basically the cost of undergrounding the overhead facilities in or near the rights-of-way. And then a second on-site improvement cost, which is the cost from running the undergrounding between the curb and the structure that doesn't already have it. The overage pertains solely to the core cost, the original cost estimate for which was $1,285,000. So it's looking like there's an additional $640,000 required in order for the project to proceed. The council has a number of different options it can take for that money, one of which is embodied in the resolution I drafted and you have for consideration this evening, and that is to impose a supplemental assessment on all the properties in the area to make up the difference. The cost will be allocated among the 116 dwelling units in the same way the original assessment was. Basically take the overage and divide it by 116 dwelling units, and that gives you the rate per dwelling unit. There's enough time between now and September 15th, which is the statutory deadline for being able to get an assessment on the annual property tax bill, to undertake the process required to impose the supplemental assessment under the city's procedural ordinance. That begins with a resolution, again, that I drafted and you have for consideration this evening. It starts the process. It identifies the need for the special assessment, what the funds will be used for, how the costs are apportioned among the affected properties, and it establishes a public hearing for September 5th. It directs the provision of published and mailed notice to all affected property owners. The mailed notice will give detailed information about why there's a need to have the additional assessment, how it's calculated, the dollar amount to be imposed against each property, and it will inform affected property owners of the time, date, and place of that September 15th public hearing before the council, at which they may come in and be heard. If the council doesn't move forward with the assessment, then basically the project comes to a halt. Because of that shortfall, there's no additional funds with which to pay the balance of the project cost. The resolution tonight does not obligate the council to move forward with an assessment program. It merely sets in motion the steps required to do a supplemental assessment to make up the gap, the shortfall in the project finance. The council can decide at the September 5th public hearing not to adopt it, or it can decide to lower the amount if it turns out that the shortfall is actually lower than the $640,000 we're currently estimating. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Rowe?
What's the impact on the homeowners. I know when we did the initial estimate, we came up with, this is the estimated assessed amount per homeowner. What would be the additional assessment on top of the original?
In the original implementing resolutions, and also the notice that went to affected property owners, the dollar amount was spelled out. For the core cost, it was $11,078 per dwelling unit. There was a notation there that said this is an estimate based on current construction costs. However, it may be that the ultimate project cost is higher. The city will not increase the assessment by more than 15% above that $11,078 without giving further notice and a public hearing opportunity to be heard. The $640,000 overage is in excess of the 15% cushion that was built into the original documentation, hence the need for the notice and the hearing process. And that $640,000, when you spread it out over the 116 dwelling units, comes to, yes, $5,518 per dwelling.
If we stuck with the original and raised the assessment by 15%, what would be the remainder that was not covered by that 15%?
I can do the math, I don't have it handy.
I would say about 35.
I think that's about right, yeah. I ran back of the envelope figures, that sounds about right, about 35.
Is that for a resident or is that total?
Per dwelling.
What would be the total? 115 times 3,500? I'm not good at math anymore.
14,500.
Could the city, since this is core components and right of way, could the city pick up some of this cost? I don't know, and designated funds.
I would think that could raise some concern with the rest of the residents.
When I first surveyed the residents in Belle Isle, there was a discussion of should the city pick up some of the common costs? And most of them said the city could pick up some of the common costs, but we would not be happy with having to pay for the individual kinds of costs. So unless something has changed there.
Well, I think when you talk about common costs, it may be something like streetlights or something of that nature, but I wouldn't say that the actual undergrounding would be, you know.
Just thought.
And I think we will have that discussion about the streetlights.
I was going to say, if you took the streetlights out of the equation here, what kind of difference would that make?
It's $60,000, that's only money. Yeah, and you have to understand, if the numbers are lower, then everybody's going to get a refund. And we're going to have a stronger position on what those numbers are here shortly. But unfortunately, because of the assessment role requirement, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, because if you don't, the council would not move forward at this point, or they set on, or the council, after hearing from the residents on September 5th, does not pass the ordinance, then what that does is we're too late for the assessment roll for this year, which means it's September 15th of next year. And if you started the project, then who's going to fund the payment of the loan against it? I will tell you that we have talked to the financial advisor has talked to the bank, and it seems that they have interest in if there's more money needed in funding it. So from that standpoint, that's a good thing, and they have indicated they would hold the interest rate, which is another good thing if you know, we move forward. But as Chris told you, that there's a timeline here that you know the council needs to decide if they want to move forward. I think the sense, and you've got some of the committee members here. Jody wasn't there, but the sense from the committee was to ask the council to move forward with at least this, and then send the notices to the residents.
And this,
Am I correct?
Yeah, I've got a few questions and comments here. Mr. Rowe, just for clarification purposes, we talked about this $5,500. That's the prepayment. If you were to finance it over the 20 years, because that was the primary interest to make it easy on people. Just refresh my memory, the yearly increase would be $480-something a year, or $35 a month difference with this increase. Is that a
Yes, sir, $418.70.
That's the increased annual cost, and the monthly cost is like between $30 and $35. Just for, again, for clarification, for everybody in the room here, based on the original concept and methodology here, who pays for this additional cost?
100% the owners of property in the assessment area.
Just wanted to clarify that, because we're going to give a quiz to everybody as they walk out tonight. Who pays for this? It's just the residents who are benefiting from this undergrounding project itself. When this project was originally undertaken, and I, along with Mr. Goldman, was one of the plank owners of this thing, was the consensus of the residents was, get it done. It's been 10 or 12 years since this project died the first time. It was resurrected, and the consensus was, get it done. And also, even if it were to die on the vine now and be resurrected another 10 to 12, 15 years from now, it certainly isn't going to get any cheaper. So my opinion and recommendation, along with the ad hoc committee, the consensus was recommend we move forward on this thing and get it done.
and this resolution doesn't put anything, doesn't cast anything in stone. It just sets inlet, so we can send out the notices, hearing on September 5th, and then have time to get the information to the tax collector by the appropriate date, correct?
That's right. The one thing that it does set in stone is the maximum amount of the assessment that can be imposed as part of the supplemental.
Okay.
It's 5518. It can come down from there, but you won't be able to go above unless you repeat the notice and public hearing process.
Then we can't get to the tax collector in time.
That's right. There won't be enough time.
So, question, okay, so if this 640,000 is incorrect, and it goes higher than that, so what you're saying is you cannot reassess the homeowners? Is that what you just said?
You could, but one of the deadlines we're working against is to try to have the assessment completely in place and lined up for tax bill collection in time for this year's tax bill. The statutory deadline for doing that is September 15th.
Why is it taking so long to get the actual cost? That's what I don't understand. We've been working on this for years. Why can't they just put an actual cost from energy and Verizon?
I think that's what we have done over the last few months. We went to get the actual cost. Now, prior to that, I didn't ever feel we had the actual cost.
It keeps fluctuating. So.
Well, now we've got a binding from Duke. I've got a binding from, is it Vitals? I've got a binding from Spectrum. So I've got that in, but I don't think we have that. Now, I think the $315,000 that we've got in the enhanced costs are going to be needed based on what I've seen thus far from people that went out and there's a few homes that already went and undergrounded their utility from the house to the street. And what they've told me, it's cost them about $2,000. So there's some fat there, and that would be reduced accordingly. And from I'll call it a standard safety standpoint, we've got a contingency in there. And, you know, if we work hard with the numbers and we get a good fixed number on the conduit, then we're really going to know what the price is. And that's why I've asked Duke to give us the takeoff. I've got the plan with all those little tiny numbers on there, but I figured it's in their computer, give it to them. So
Coming from the street to the house, I thought it was an additional cost to the homeowner.
it is, but that's, I'd give everybody the spreadsheet. And if you look in the center line of the spreadsheet, if you go down and look, the cost underground to the homes, there's 70. That cost is the additional cost to the homeowner, which that cost, I'm pretty sure is going to be significantly lower than that, to those 70 homes. And hopefully we can negotiate a better engineering cost consultant, because we've already went and got the cost estimates. So we don't need an engineer to go do that. We should be able to give them to it, and hopefully that cost will go down, because the estimate was $95,000, because that's what CPWG gave us. You know, they gave us a report that told that amount. In speaking with Chris, the financial advisor, and things of that nature, those costs are pretty well established, which is the lower numbers. Streetlight, there's $60,000 in there. If we do something different, I've also asked, in case we don't do the solar, I've asked Duke to give me a price to replace the lights with the concrete pole, with the lower density light, 1-for-1, to see what that cost is, that I can bring to the committee to share that with them. That's an option that we have. Well, in that, I'm pretty sure, or I'll say I'm 95% sure that that cost is going to be negligible if the W Estates Island decided to opt for that, as opposed to spending $5,000 a light per street light, which that may be a different situation too. So I think we've got better numbers now, but it took time to get those numbers, and my personal feeling is that I don't think that was the gist of it in my looking at this overall, that we were getting real good numbers from the consultant. And Marv and I have talked about that, and I think we pretty much agreed to that.
Most aggravating thing is Duke Energy.
I've got one more question. The original solution and project had a built-in plus 10% within reason. Is the confidence level so high now that you don't need that? You're putting a cap on this at 2.2?
We did not include that margin this go around. We certainly could. But it's my understanding, talking to that we went through the numbers together, and there's already plenty of conservatives built in.
We'll get all the houses done, and then if we run out of money, we'll put you up.
Any other discussion about the resolution in 2018? 16. Ready to vote? Ed?
Discussion in the audience?
Okay. Any comments from the audience on the resolution? Ed? It's all yours.
Councilmember Bean.
Aye.
Councilmember Gunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Chakowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwer.
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Boris.
Aye.
Mayor Notaro.
Aye. Resolution 2018-16 passes 7-0. Our monthly financial report. Melanie?
Hello, everyone. So this financial report is from June, And the first page you see is your cash and investments. We have made over $5,000 in interest this month, and just about 5.5 in total cash and investments. And the second page shows you your breakdown of what is restricted, non-current, and current. Do you have any questions on those 2 pages?
On the general fund designated that has these breakdown on the encumbered, are these different encumbered numbers broken out anywhere, explain what the numbers relate to?
Down in the bottom on the second page, I could have brought all that with you, but basically those are all for different POs that we have open, so they've already been spoken for, and it's capital, so it's all capital. It would probably all be in the Public Works Department then, so those are all capital POs that are still open, that if they do not get completed, this year will roll over to the following year.
So right now they're encumbered against the general fund as opposed to the capital fund?
There's different capital. There are capital items that are in the general fund that are in Public Works, and then that's capital outlay, and then capital projects, which are your infrastructure, your building, that's in the capital projects fund, and those things are handled differently. But like trucks and buoys and things like that are in the general fund.
I think it would be helpful to have kind of a list of those, what those restricted funds are targeted for.
That's what those are for. Those are all in the general fund. Those are all POs for capital, which is in the budget. I can always do a supplement to this and email it out to you and tell you who the provider is and what it's for and what account number it's to, if you want that. In capital projects fund, everything in there is designated because it's all for capital, so there's a PO for everything, or it's a rollover item.
I understand, but it doesn't make it clear to us how, what the money's being used for, so it would be helpful if we just have that, just so we know what projects. We're not even certain, I don't think, what the capital projects that are being done right now and what's on the I've asked this a couple times from Lynn, and we don't really have those capital improvement projects spelled out for us, or where the money's coming from, or if we're going to apply for grants for any of these things. We don't have any of that, so it would be helpful to have that.
Okay. There is a little, just because I know you're new to the process, when you look at the budget, it's going to show the capital that's budgeted for those items, and then in the CIP, which is a supplemental for both the general and the capital projects fund, it's going to show you those projects and where the funding comes from. But I don't have a problem with putting it on this page if it makes it easier for you to understand.
It would be much easier to have it in one place rather than going to 5 different locations, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay. And then we're in our budget and brief, which brings you to the percentages. We're 75% through the year, and for revenues and expenditures, we're about 63%. And the bulk of that is if you look in the green section for the general funds, you're going to see that the contribution from the Marina Fund and appropriations from fund balance, those are manual entries that I do between funds that are budgeted. And those don't usually get done until the end of the year, and that's what's making up the bulk of the shortage, why it's not 75%. And that's true also down for the expenditures when we have transfers out to the capital projects fund. That's a manual item. Other than that, things that are lower in the expenditures are due to vacancies in the salaries of city manager, as well as for Public Works, code enforcement. When we get to the Marina Fund, their revenues are about on track, but again, the expenditures are much lower, and again, that's because there's, those are all booking entries per se. Capital improvements is budgeted for docks and improvements to the marina. Nothing's been done in there, and I think Lynn's intention is to carry that over to the following year. So that won't physically be done, but it will be encumbered and rolled over. Depreciation is a booking entry that won't happen until the end of the year, and the contributions to the general fund is an entry that will transfer again probably next month. So that's what's making up the difference in that fund. Capital Projects Fund, that the money comes from state funding and grants, and the state funding generally runs 2 months behind, and that's why that's at 61%. What you're showing is a grant that's actually the Gulf Boulevard beautification, and we have a big item coming up shortly for that undergrounding of the wires on Gulf Boulevard, and that will be reimbursed after we make that expenditure, and that's why that hasn't appeared yet. And transfers in from the general fund, only $500,000 has been moved over so far. So it's fairly on track as well. Same thing goes for the expenditure side. It's that Gulf Boulevard beautification, the undergrounding of the wires there that has not been done yet, and that's why the expenditures are only at 40%. So we're really on track with the expenses and the revenues. I know a couple of things came up at the last meeting. Marvy had talked about the property taxes, and I had explained how the property appraiser sells the tax certificate June 1st. And just to be certain, I did contact the supervisor over there, and there is zero money owed to Bel Air Beach, so we are completely whole as far as the property appraiser goes. And in the CAFR, that's going to show up on page 37 of the CAFR, that whole process explaining how the property taxes are billed and collected, and even the delinquent taxes, how those are sold and the interest rates that we receive in there. So that'll clear that up. And then I think the other thing that I was asked about was parking revenue. For all the new meters, we've got 4 meters now. And Morgan Park, through through June 30th, we collected $58,000 at Morgan Park. We collected $110 at City Hall, but that meter just got installed, so that's a good thing. And then Bayside Park is $3,500. That breaks out the total of all the parking meters that you're seeing in the general fund. There's a separate line item for those things in the Marina Fund by itself. If you look at 4715 is the total money collected through June 30th in the Marina Fund. So that breaks out parking meters. Is there any other questions?
I've got a couple. Just for clarification, Marina Fund, Capital Projects Fund expenditures, the lag you're explaining is, in the metrics, is just basically a lag in the bookkeeping and the way the money's expended. There's no danger that none of those projects are going to slip and not meet the end of the year deadline. Is that true, then?
Well, it's not a lag in bookkeeping, it's a lag in money coming in from the state. The state, I guess you could call it a lag in the state's bookkeeping, but it's not a lag in the city's bookkeeping. They don't send those collections in for 2 months in arrears.
But that's a reimbursement for us. We have money to pay for that up front, and we're reimbursed right when we're in. So if the money's in our account, why is there a lag in the expenditures?
You're talking about the marina?
Well, looking at the expenditures under the Marina Fund and the capitals, ordinarily with the 75% metric in the year, and yet, based on your summary there.
I just explained that Lynn was going to be carrying over that $7,500 to do a much bigger project. We budget $7,500 in the marina each year to either do catwalks or boat slips. And that in this particular year, Lynn is carrying those funds over to do the work next year.
Well, this goes right to the specificity that Ms. Shirley was saying, and I agree with it, is I have been through the CAFR and the comp plan with a fine-tooth comb, and the start-stop dates for the projects aren't in there, and unless it's in code or something, I can't make out the funding sources for all these things. So I agree. I think we need a more specific summary of some of these projects, the funding and the start-stop timelines. Just
Yeah, some of
I need
the,
to start-stop from Lynn because I don't do.
some of the,
It's gonna be a team.
yeah, some of the projects are, we do savings, and we save for them, so when the expense comes up, and that's what you're seeing on that first page, I believe, Melanie, when you talk about 3,000, 2,500, those are funds that we're saving to, as an example, buy a truck, buy a tractor, things of that nature. And we put an amount of money in the marina to do what we need to do when we need to do it. We need to save money for that. Because, as an example, I know council's asked me to look at doing some things in the marina. Well, the current savings is,
$1,500.
no. in the marina,
20,000.
15,000.
$15,000.
Which you're not going to go along with very far with $15,000. So we're trying to be prudent and add money to that fund. So when we do come up with a reasonable project, as an example, the council's asked me to look at expanding the marina. And I've asked the company to give me a proposal for that to see what that cost might be to do the design work and things of that nature. So that's where that money would be utilized eventually, but it's just it's a savings account.
Can I ask a question? So are we saying the capital projects fund is our reserve account?
No.
Not necessarily.
Every fund has its own reserves, but the nature of the capital project fund itself, because it does big ticket items, that the capital projects fund is the fund that you use to do your roads and your
I
bridges and
understand. So I guess I guess my assumption is that it's in the capital project fund, that those are current drainage projects going on, road improvements, that sort of
They're
thing.
not necessarily currently going on. There are currently going on items, but like when we sit down and we look at the budget, you're going to see, like what Lynn was saying, a lot of these things in the general fund, in the justification next to, it's going to say a savings, that this is an accumulation fund. And what that means is every year, because we don't need to buy a truck every year, we're going to buy a truck, and then we're starting an accumulation fund. Every year, we're going to put aside $3,000 for that truck, and then in 10 years, we'll have enough money to buy the truck.
Right, so then that just adds another element to things that I'd like to see, which would be a list of those reserve accounts, so we know what's in them.
That's what this is, and you would want more detail
Yeah,
to it,
just
so
so
that's
it's
fine.
clear, so I know when I
Yeah.
see something that is restricted, is it restricted because it's reserved for saving up for the new docks,
Well,
or is it?
I can
restricted
also
because-
provide a balance sheet for every fund. I don't know if Lynn wants me to do that, but when you look at the balance sheets are going to show all these numbers. That's exactly where this came from, was the balance sheet. And it's going to say a separate account number. It's going to say what it's held for. Doesn't mean it's not going to list who the vendor is that we have the PO for, because some of them we might not even have a PO, like for the docks, but it's going to say what this is being held for. So maybe just a balance sheet included with this.
You guys can decide.
Part of the comp plan, the section discussing capital improvements too, talks about an annual review. And I know that Lynn Reeves is doing that, but I think as we start getting a little deeper into best practices, we need to integrate the council into that. Because when you go through, I've gone through the capital improvement projects and sorted it differently, because if you sort it by a priority of the project based on, hey, is there a regulatory legality, is it crumbling infrastructure, is it a safety issue, or is it an aesthetics and a resident issue? And then you also sort it by its funding source. Hey, is it free money? Is it coming from grants? Is it coming from assessment of the residents who are benefiting from it? Or is it a shared expense between city and grants? Or is it just funded by the city? Things start to shake out and other things start bubbling to the top. And I think the council collectively needs that kind of visibility so that we can make good decisions here. So I see that coming in best practices right down the line.
Melanie, I have a question on, particularly on the depreciation, where you say you'll be making the entry at the end of the year for the amount of depreciation. You don't accrue an amount each month toward that? Is it you do cash accounting versus accrual, or just don't do the accruals?
That's typical governmental accounting. It's you know, obviously not a cash entry. And in the marina fund, it's a little odd too, because we book it and then to show it, and then we reverse it all out and put it into fixed assets, because although you all look at these three funds every month and every year, we have three other funds that you don't look at because they're booking entries. So we have a fixed asset fund. And so all the fixed assets that we actually pay for through an expenditure in the general fund and capital project fund are then turned around and booked into our fixed asset fund. And that's also where we book our depreciation. And those are done quarterly. So this is really just an entry to true things up for the financial statements. It doesn't affect our cash flow because it's not a cash item.
Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate this very much.
Was there not a budget workshop?
There was on the 30th.
What's the next one?
We're done with our workshops. The next budget meeting is going to be, what, September 5th at 5:30, and then the final budget hearing will be September 17th at 5:05.
Thank you, Melanie. Very helpful.
May I ask a question? It's not from Melanie, it's voted for. You need to come up for it.
Brad Elliott, 2202 Donato Drive. How many non-residents are at the marina?
Sir, this was the budget, this was the
It is-
financial report.
so I can't
It's
ask
not
it.
a question.
Okay, I won't ask a question.
What's happening at the marina? I'm sorry. Item 20, city manager comments.
Okay, I left you a stack of papers at your desk. If you kept them in order, I'll go through them that way. I left you something we're trying to do with the code enforcement. It's a brochure on it, and we're going to even make a smaller brochure that I think we'll send out to the residents to get some more clarity in what the codes are, because I've found out over the last few weeks that there's a lot of misinformation out there, not only from, I hope it's not coming from City Hall, but I think some of it is coming from the guy selling something. And he even though he knows he needs a permit, he's telling people he doesn't need a permit, so I don't know where that's at. But anyway, also this month, we've started this monthly report. This is what Laura has done for the month of July. And it's basically by date, address, what was there, and what the outcome was if we have an outcome. As an example, we've had a couple of short-term rentals, of course the sheds, everybody knows about that. But some of the things that, we went around town and tried to make the residents aware of various things. We did have another short-term rental code hearing today, and that person was found guilty today. So this is just something for you to take home with you and take a look at. Then I've given you the traffic items for 2nd Street in Donato. And I've highlighted the 2nd Street traffic run was done the 3rd through the 9th of July. There were 2,031 vehicles. There were 14 vehicles traveling over 31 on 2nd Street. The average speed was 23 miles an hour. And then Donato, this was done July 9th through the 17th. There were 2,794 vehicles recorded. The 85th percentile was 21 miles an hour. There were 11 vehicles that did between 31 and 35 on Donato. No vehicles traveled over 36 miles an hour. I don't have the report back for 9th Street because there was a comment about speeding on 9th Street. The boxes over there, and we put the ghost car over there for a little while. So I hope the people that live on 9th didn't think we were casing them or something.
Now, if we're looking at Donato, looking at the speeds that were registered, is there a speed limit signs readily available there? Says it's 25 miles an hour?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but we can check on that. But in both cases, it was a very small, minute amount of people speeding. We've had several comments that there's been speeding on Donato, and sometimes I think when we're standing along the edge of the road, we might think a car speeding, and it's really not, because it's close to us. So that's those things. I've also, this is the month I need to give you the flood management progress report and the status of floodplain management and repetitive loss report for our CRS. So I've given you both those reports. Mainly it just talks about the hurricane season, what's happening with beach renourishment. Our project is done. They are going to do some tilling on the beach this week. Well, we're supposed to be a few days. We are discussing with them the boardwalk that kind of goes out of Morgan Park that has been buried in sand before the beach renourishment. I had some conversation with the coastal manager from Pinellas County about, and with DEP about taking that boardwalk out instead of leaving it there because it's too low, and it really serves no purpose. And
well, isn't it supposed to keep from eroding the dune there?
Well, the dunes on each side, there's no dune under it.
If it were higher, there would be a dune under it.
Well, at this point, they use that for the access for beach renourishment. So that would, in essence, take out the dune, and that's the walkway to the beach. So what the contractor, because they did a little bit of damage to the boardwalk, he's offered to take it out if we want to take it out. And after talking to DEP today and to the county for future renourishment projects, we'd be better off to take it out and just maintain the walkway. So unless the council has an issue with that, we'll proceed with that. He's got some other damages. He hit the bombing range sign. They gotta fix that. The railing around the bathroom, there's a couple things they gotta do there. We'll have a walkthrough on the beach, and I think the tilling will eliminate some of that heavy shells deposits. And I know last week I was out there in the pickup truck, and it's pretty hard, so hopefully. But on the other hand, I've heard a lot of positive comments about the amount of sand, and our beach is a lot wider. So from a positive standpoint, that's a good thing.
And I just made a comment about that boardwalk. I think they should repair it. I think they should leave it there and repair it, because I think it does stop some of the sand from washing up into the park and what have you. I mean, the wood, you know, the wood kind of keeps the sand on the beach there. And
Well, well, it's, right now, every one of our, unfortunately, the dune walks are, for the most part, because of past renourishments, are buried. They're too low to the ground. I have asked the county, sent a letter to the county, it's been 6 weeks ago, but it won't happen until next year if they need some money. That maybe we can get some money from them to, if we want to add it back. But when you have renourishment, you aren't going to drive a bulldozer over a boardwalk. That's just a fact of life, and that's our only access.
that's my thought, so.
So,
I like the boardwalks, and I do think having the dunes there is a protection for all of us. So, to the extent that we can keep the dunes and keep the boardwalks would be nice.
I think the board would suggest putting one of those handicap ramps.
yeah, maybe
People can
mowing
take,
that, but I don't know if they're going to pay for that, but, you know.
suggestion.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the type of equipment that went in there, I mean, for the people that live around those condos, just to get the one bulldozer in there, they built a dune to drive the bulldozer above the boardwalk because they couldn't get through. And so I think we can accomplish both and keep the sand from washing. And it may be that the dune creates itself, and when you walk out to the park, you just walk over it. And that does happen in some places. I did a survey, I've given you that, constant contact survey, and just to give you some highlights, highlighted a few things. One of the questions was, do you support enforcement of the city codes? Well, we had 100 respondents, 94 of them said yes. So that's a big number. Do you support the enforcement of the codes? Some of the highlights of the things they thought we should enforce. Of course, short-term rentals were in there, derelict houses, parking on the streets, boat storage, and let's see, the other one that was 30% or higher, unfortunately, were sheds that are not compliant, that weren't permitted. Lawn care, and I think the code review committee has made a recommendation to lower that lot cutting, grass cutting, from 12 inches to 7, and that should improve that. We did ask about recorded meetings. The majority, about 58% don't watch the meetings. Said 40 did have at one time or another. We did ask the question about streaming. Only 36% we should stream the meetings. We asked if they would like to be included in surveys. Pretty responsive there. 79% said they use the beach accesses. 21 said they never do. We asked a question about city staff, and it was in 3 categories. 88% said it was good, fair, or poor. They said good. And a couple comments were made about that I should have used a different word, which is good. Oh, that's vocabulary. Just some, and one other thing I forgot to mention, we did a poll on what time the city council meeting should be. And It's really all over the place, but the highest number was 7 o'clock. It's kind of, it seems like the target area is between 6 and 7, or 6 and 6:30, if you look at the numbers. Dogs on the beaches were probably the biggest comments we had in just the comment section. Off their leash, people not picking up, more enforcement on the beach violations. One comment, larger storage sheds, bigger than 36 square feet. They did say only 4, no. Appearance of the, there again, it was more pets, commercial signs on vehicles. Those were those comments. The comments about the city staff overall, I thought they were really nice. A lot of great comments about the city staff. Just a comment about more code enforcement in a couple of places, and how we enforce those. So this is the first survey we've done. We'll do some others, depending on what we need questions. And I will say that any resident that didn't get the survey, if you email the city, we'll put you on the email list. That's how we send it out. We've got about 400 emails right now. I went to, this item is the West Bay Drive Complete Streets Project. They've got a working group of city staff. Largo was there, Bel Air Bluffs. Actually, Barb was there from Bel Air Shore, and myself from Bel Air Beach. Largo has a different idea of what they want to do on West Bay than most of the rest of the people. So this is just information to take with you. There will be another meeting and they will be coming back. Bel Air Bluffs' main concern was making sure the lanes were at least 11 feet, where currently they're 12 to 12.5, depending on where they're at. And then the last item, I gave you the update on the current grant situation. I mentioned earlier we're going to go to Swift Mud on Thursday to a workshop. We did get our first payment from FEMA. I think it was $3,400. Melanie would know that for sure. As far as board reports, there were no meetings this month. 23 people paid ahead for the undergrounding. Traffic control I talked about. We talked about that. We're going to have a special meeting about the trash, solid waste. We got 3 bids, and the staff has ranked them, and it's kind of a mixed ranking. So what I'm thinking is if we can do that at the work session on the...
Quick question on that while you're there. Did any of them propose to include specialized bins or their own bins?
Yes, and that's where we've got a mixed situation. Just to kind of give you a quick shot, Waste Management came in the highest on the base contract, but when you went back to look at them to provide bins, they were in the middle. And the one vendor, the first vendor in that, wanted to provide 96-gallon monster cans, which I don't think that's what we're after. So if you negated that, then Waste Management, but the cost was about almost $4 more a month total. But they would provide 2 cans, put lids on them, and then replace them. So that's what, I want to have that discussion so we can move forward with that.
And I was particularly interested in that, because that was something the code review committee came up with, was making sure that every garbage can had a lid.
Yes.
And I know we lost one of ours, we can't find a replacement.
Yeah, so The one thing I do want to ask the council about the code enforcement, you've heard a lot of what ifs. What is the council's position on us enforcing the codes? Because I'm getting a little pushback about certain codes as opposed to other codes. So I need a little bit of feedback from the council.
I think Glenn had a good point earlier. Is it a safety issue or just an aesthetics issue? And let's maybe prioritize based on that, which the importance of the code be enforcing them.
Well, the concerns that have been brought forward is the fact that, well, if my neighbor says it's okay, then I should be able to do this. So that's where I'm getting the feedback from, and you know, if just how that's interpreted, if a neighbor says it's okay, then we'll just take an example. If my neighbor says it's okay, then I can have a 12-foot fence. Or if my neighbor says it's okay on both sides, I can be a short-term rental.
No,
So I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope we're going down. And it's just
That's
gonna
why I want to-
it's just gonna handcuff your department. I totally disagree with that. It should be global, and that way it's fair. So if someone's hedges on the north side are 12 feet, you know, or whatever the case may be, the same should go throughout the entire city.
Anybody who's interested in hedges, that would be chapter 94, that's probably 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Not that I was singling out hedges, I was just giving it as an example.
Yeah, so, you know, I just wanted some feedback because I don't want to, you know, I know you as members have gotten pushback on us checking on something or telling somebody to cut their grass.
No, we need fairness and global enforcement.
Yes. Agree with that.
There's a question.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Mike Dershowitz, 102 8th. I had decided I wasn't going to do this, but since it has come up, I will. Are you all aware that every one of you, with the exception of the mayor who lives up the condo, is in violation of that section? And before you start enforcing codes on me, you should get your own house in order. Paragraph 5 of section 94 says that any vegetation within 3.5 feet of a property line shall be considered a hedge and shall be subject to the height restrictions contained herein. All of you have hedges and trees that are taller than 3 feet in your front yard. Jody, I'll use you as an example. You have a wonderful, beautiful banyan tree in your front yard. I didn't put a tape measure on it, but just looking, that tree is on your front property line. Now keep in mind, people, that most of the roads in Bel Air Beach are 60 feet wide. So if you pull a tape from the center line of the road 30 feet up into your yard, that is your property line. I talked to Glenn about this. He has a lovely island of vegetation in the middle of his front yard, but half of it is in his property and half of it is in the right-of-way. We are all responsible for maintaining the right-of-way. Consequently, to comply, he would have to cut a 7-foot wide path through the middle of this island, 3 feet tall. So before you implement wholesale compliance, that code needs to be revisited and edited and allowed.
Chapter 94, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yes.
So, please come.
August 21st?
I think I'm in town. Now, another issue, the 7-inch tall grass. How many of you, have ornamental grass in your yard, a clump up in a flower bed somewhere, it's grass. It can't be over 7 inches. What got me in trouble was I have bamboo in the back around my pool. And I hesitate to make it public knowledge, but anybody that takes an encyclopedia can find out that bamboo is a grass. It can't be over 7 inches tall. There's bamboo all over Bel Air Beach.
We'll look at the code enforcement, or the code review committee will take a look at it, and we will check those things out. Thank you, sir.
Let me make one more point, please. And that is when code enforcement first came to my house, it was because my neighbor had a hedge in his front yard that's about 12 feet tall. The problem is his hedge is 4 feet from the property line. So according to this code, it's not a hedge, because hedges are within 3.5 feet of the property line. Consequently, his hedge is legal. Like I say, this code needs a major override.
That's the point of our committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, any other city manager comments?
I am done.
Item 21, we tabled that. Item 22, consideration of appointment to the Bel Air Beach Park and Rec Board. It's got your name on it, Patty.
Yeah, there are currently openings on the board, that's in my staff report. And, Mr. Canny, is Mr. Canny here?
How you doing?
That's Mr. Canny.
I know, sir.
And, he would like to be appointed to the board.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion to appoint Mr. Canny?
So moved.
Is that correct?
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
The next item is the appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board. We have two, there's one opening and there are two people who have applied for it. Mr. Thomas Draskovics, did I remember that?
You get points just for pronouncing it, thank you.
Pardon?
You get points just for pronouncing it.
And Jules Chandler. Who's here? And Jules. We have one opening and one person to appoint. Discussion?
Question?
Yeah.
Would either one of you want to be on the Parks Board? Because we have an open position there, it looks like, from the last vote.
Jules,
Does anyone
I
else
actually
say?
didn't know that you were the other.
And I don't know who the other Parks Board is, one that Mr.
The chairman asked me.
Draskovics.
Well, I'm going to defer to you. I mean, you've actually had a lot of experience in this, so if you prefer to be on the other board, I'll volunteer for the other one.
You don't want to do the Parks and Rec.
Yeah, there are two members, two openings on the Park Board, and we just appointed Mr. Candy, so we've still got one opening on the Park Board. Mr. Draskovics, would you be, I noticed you put Park and Rec Board as one of your options on your application. Would you be willing to serve on the Parks and Recreation Board?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I'm gonna take a vote for who we want on the board, and then the person left over can go to the other.
Well, Jules Chandler's only said Sheila wants to be on the planning board, so.
Will she consider it if it's open?
Pardon?
Will she consider it if it's open?
The planning board? I'm seeing a no back there.
Parks and Recreation.
She was on that board once before.
I've attended those meetings, I wasn't.
Okay, would either of you like to come up and speak?
I've attended Parks and Rec's meetings, but I haven't officially been on the board. And I want planning and zoning, period.
Okay. Do I have a motion to appoint either of these two people to either of these boards? How do I want to do this? How about before they?
I move to appoint Mr. Draskovics to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Is there a second? Pardon?
Might as well be a second.
Okay. All in favor of appointing Mr. Draskovics to the Planning and Zoning Board? Say aye.
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 Opposed? No?
What?
Do we have to count those? I mean, do you want to,
Do you want to do a roll call?
would you please, for Mr. Draskovics to the Planning and Zoning Board?
Councilmember Bean,
Aye.
Councilmember Gunn,
Aye.
Councilmember Petrowski,
No?
Councilmember Spear,
No.
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pavoris,
Aye.
Mayor Notary.
No. Okay. 4-3, he's appointed to the Planning and Zoning Board. Okay, that is the last item on the agenda until we get to council comments, right? Or unfinished business. Any unfinished business that anyone would like to bring up at this point?
Did we ever get the crosswalk study?
I sent you an email, he told me, I think this week,
This week?
it was August. He told me in August they were on. Hopefully he got me.
Any other unfinished business anyone would like to bring up? Marvin, you'd like to raise your hand?
Right, the only thing, we talked about 2 abandoned homes a while back.
Yes?
One of them was on 9th, the other one was on 8th. One on Louisa has been kind of sold and fixed up a little bit, but those 2 were still pending. I know 9th is being worked on, but Paul was gonna look into the situation with 8th, and we haven't heard anything from Paul.
Put that on his to-do list.
In the Warrenville Boulevard, we got him to our worship place on the corner.
You got one?
Got them to power worship.
They painted the garage doors, I believe.
Yeah, they did some work on it, and so, other than some landscaping things, they have made it look a little better than it did. Well, I guess a lot better than it did.
There's one more item on unfinished business. Now, this dates back to March 7th, 2012. So it's a little way dated. But I just got a hold of the Miller Beach Marina feasibility report. And I know it's before pretty much everybody's time, but there was a little section in there that's, pretty eye-opening. Now, we paid for this report, but I don't think we ever took action on it, or correct me if I'm wrong. But under grants, and I'll read it verbatim, there are various grants that would apply to either or both of these land uses, talking about the marina. GBLA, which is Grand Booth Landscape Architecture, can work with the city to provide part or all of the grant application preparations, as we have done for several other communities. I'm wondering, did we ever take advantage, I know it was before your timeline, but did we ever take advantage of anything like this? I mean, we paid for the report, I'm wondering if, it probably would have been a freebie.
Yeah, I don't know that, Mayor, you may know, that was in Rob's, or no, Kathy's time, right?
I don't
Well-
recall off the top of my head. I can go back and
Okay.
check it out.
Yeah, because I don't have anything in the file other than that was done.
It's just a little disconcerting that we didn't take advantage of something like this.
And that the plan itself is rejected.
I don't know,
Yeah, if you don't have the design parameters for that,
this is all we got.
yeah, but I'm saying if there is no design sheets and the detail that you need to submit for a grant application, it may be Florida code.
Yeah, well, they said they would do it for us, and they've done several others, so I'm sure they would be aware of that. But anyways.
We'll look into that. Any other unfinished business? No? Okay, council comments. Where do we want to start? Glenn?
I'm always first in the queue. Great job with the survey. It's kind of nice to get involvement and you be able to reach out to the survey, the constant contact stuff, and get direct feedback from the residents. I hope more residents will sign up for it. The results from the survey regarding code enforcement, they picked the top 5. Is there any plan to have a follow-on to say, hey, give us a priority in these? Because obviously it's a time management kind of thing. We've got one code enforcement person and they can't be working 7 by 24, so there has to be some priority in the things they address, and along with the code enforcement review committee and setting priorities, it'll kind of give us a game plan of how to approach some of this stuff.
Yeah, we'll do, I want to share this with the code review committee, and then we'll look at doing some other variations of it. I do feel like this shorter brochure that we're developing, I want to mail that, and at the same time, I would like to put in there so people do sign up for the survey. You know, if they didn't sign up for the newsletter, they wouldn't get it. So, and I think that's not a big cost to I'll call it for education. I don't think that's a big cost to educate the community. It'll be it's looking more like a trifold, something we can, you know, mass mail, and hopefully we'll get more people to sign up.
This will go up on the new website, right?
Yeah. And speaking of the website, the website is new. We've got several things to update on it. So don't think we're behind. It just went live over the weekend.
Version 1.
Yes.
Take it as you understand that.
And they went to training today, so that's working.
Good stuff. I've got one more thing, and along with the best practices in the finance workshops, I mean, we identified certain valuable assets within the city. City Hall, the marina, waterfront areas. The ideas are starting to evolve a little bit, and the thought of separating the parking lot at the marina from the actual waterfront and the slip rentals is starting to gel a little bit. We've had some suggestions about possibly leasing or renting additional parking for the condos and hotels across the street. Something that came up was Pam had a terrific idea along these lines, and let me finish this before you start saying, oh, this is ridiculous, because you know, several cities, like Plant City, Lakeland, and we're investigating some other ones, have these food truck rallies. And food trucks these days aren't anymore the chili dog stuff. I mean, they're moving into gourmet foods, very eclectic foods, and there's a huge spectrum of stuff out there. There are people out there who specialize in coordinating these events, and they are highly, highly flexible. And it's something for us to possibly consider. Pam's certainly interested in taking the lead, maybe meeting with the city manager, Lynn Reeves, and bringing in the point of contact with this, to kind of look at the feasibility of this thing, and maybe then come back to the council to pitch the idea. The idea is there's tremendous flexibility in this stuff, so far as scheduling, what food trucks you want to come in, and all that appears to be required is just a special events permit. And they're very flexible on, hey, if you want to rent the space by the month or whatever, or you want to share in whatever revenues come in, that's a possibility too. And you can also structure whatever agreements so that it's absolutely no loss to the city. It either makes money or it doesn't. So you go with a short-term trial time frame, maybe 3 months, a couple events. You can focus on residents. You can focus on people passing through. Now that's the beauty of part of this is 2 areas could come into focus here. One is the marina parking lot. The other would be the parking lot right here in City Hall. And we're dealing with all this traffic congestions, and it's a big lemon for us, but we could turn it into lemonade, because if you got so much traffic passing by, everybody's gonna be driving by going, hey, what's that? And maybe there's some possibilities to generate some revenue here. So I'll toss that out, and maybe if there's some interest in this, Pam could lead up a meeting with the city manager and maybe kind of kick it around to see if it's feasible for further consideration by the council.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
I don't think so. You don't use the local restaurants right now in the city, and you want to bring in outsiders.
Okay, excuse me.
Start with your local people first.
Thank you. Marv, I'm sorry, you done, Glenn?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I went to a 4th of July celebration event that Bel Air Bluffs had, and it was very nice. It was put on by the city for the residents, and it's something we haven't done here for many years, and maybe that's something we should look into, you know, and maybe could incorporate some of the local businesses in to help us along coordinating some of this stuff. So, something to think about.
I have nothing today.
Okay, well, right around the corner is our strategic plan and best practices meeting. So if I could ask the staff, as well as the council members, to come up with any recommendations they would like and just forward them to Patty, that would give us a good foundation, a good jumping off point.
That's the August 20th.
August 20th is best practices, and then the following month is strategic planning. So whatever ideas, recommendations you have for staff included, please, if you can forward them to Patty and she can distribute them amongst us.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
John?
Okay. Well, thank all these people for coming out. I appreciate it. It's nice to be able to talk to someone instead of empty chairs. So thank you. Lynn, thanks for the survey. That was great to go out and go forward and do something more or extra than you know that you're required to do. Melanie, thank you very much for all your help and all your work. And that's it.
Yeah, I just kind of ditto John there in that it's nice to see faces in the audience, and everyone, thank you. And thanks to the staff and the council. I missed the last budget meeting, but job well done in getting that done. And thanks, Melanie, for all your help. And, you know, it's good. We're all moving along, and I'm liking the direction things are going in this meeting on the 20th. Sounds like it'll be real productive. So thank you, guys.
Okay. Mayor's Council meeting last week, I guess, they were handing out these Florida Veterans Benefits guides from the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. And they're very interesting with all the different benefits that veterans can give. And we'll be getting a bunch of these and having them at the council here in City Hall for our, all of our veterans to get what they're entitled to. That's all I've got. Lynn? You got anything? No? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.